December 26th, 9:00 in the morning, New York. I sat at the edge of a long glass table, sunlight spilling through the floor-to-ceiling windows of a boardroom that did not belong to my family, but to me. My name is Isabella Thompson, though most people call me Bella. I am 20 years old, and until a few nights ago, my family treated me as if I were born to scrub their floors, cook their meals, and keep quiet in the corner while my younger sister was celebrated. For years, my mother and sister looked straight through me, telling friends I was unemployed, or in between opportunities, while I carried their bags, polished their silverware, and hid the truth of who I really was. But on Christmas Eve, everything shifted, and that shift brought me here today. I want you to imagine being told by your own mother that your only value is in serving food while your sister shines in the spotlight. I want you to imagine packing your bag to leave for an important business meeting, only to be ordered to cancel your plans because your family insists you must cook for 25 powerful guests. That was my reality on December 24th. My mother Margaret's voice on the phone was cold and commanding. My sister Cassie's text message was filled with arrogance. They told me I had no choice. They said family came first, but family in my house only came first when they needed me as a maid. Here is the part they never knew. For 2 years, I had been building a company from nothing. EventLink was not a hobby, not a side project. It was my work, my passion, my proof that I was more than what they claimed. 15 employees relied on me. 2 hotels had already signed with us. A major contract worth millions was within reach. And the very man they wanted to impress on Christmas Eve, the man they thought would hand Cassie an $8 million contract, was the same CEO who had been waiting to meet me, not her. So picture this. It is Christmas Eve at 7 in the evening. Guests are arriving, coats are being hung, crystal glasses are being filled. My mother is nervous, my sister is glowing with expectation, and the CEO they hope to charm steps through the door. But the kitchen is empty. The food is nowhere. There is no maid scurrying to please them. There is only silence and the weight of their choices. At that very moment, I was no longer their servant. I was the leader of a company they had refused to see. On that night, I stopped being invisible. On that night, I learned that strength is not measured by how long you endure disrespect, but by the moment you choose to walk away and let others face the truth of their own arrogance. And when the CEO finally looked across the room and called me boss, I realized something I want you to hear clearly. Your worth is not decided by those who diminish you. Your worth is decided by the courage to stand tall when everyone else expects you to bow. If you have ever been treated as less in your own family, if you have ever hidden your success just to keep the peace, I want to know. Comment where you are watching from. Tell me your story. I read every single one because I know the power of being seen. And if you want to hear how Christmas Eve turned into the night that shattered my family's illusions and revealed who I truly am, stay with me. This is only the beginning. December 23rd, 3 in the afternoon the day before Christmas Eve. The sky over Connecticut was gray heavy with the promise of snow. My phone buzzed on my desk and I already knew from the sharp vibration pattern that it was a family group text. Cassie, my younger sister by 2 years, had typed in her usual gloating style. She announced that she had arranged the Christmas Eve dinner at our parents' home and that an extraordinary guest would attend. Michael Grant, the CEO of Grant Hospitality, will be there. He is looking for new PR partners, and this is my chance to shine, she wrote. I sat back in my chair and stared at the message. For most people, it might have sounded like exciting family news. For me, it was a punch in the stomach. Michael Grant was not just another executive. He was the man my team at EventLink had been corresponding with for weeks. His corporation managed luxury resorts across the country. Winning his contract could change the trajectory of our company. But Cassie thought he was there for her. She believed, as she always did, that every spotlight belonged to her alone. At 3:15, my mother followed up with a call. She did not even greet me with hello. Her tone was clipped businesslike, almost military. Bella, you need to arrive at the house by noon tomorrow. 25 guests, 7 main courses, 10 sides dessert service. This is not negotiable, she ordered. I held the phone away from my ear, staring at the papers on my desk, which included financial projections for EventLink's first quarter of expansion. My heart pounded with both anger and disbelief. I asked carefully what she expected me to do with my own plans. "Cancel them," she said. "This is important for your sister. She will host executives, investors, people of real value. Family must present a strong image. You can be useful in the kitchen. You are not needed anywhere else." The last sentence was not an accidental slip. It was the distilled truth of how my mother had always seen me. Useful only when cooking invisible the rest of the time. At 4 o'clock, I shut my laptop with trembling hands. On the screen had been an email from Michael Grant's assistant confirming his interest in meeting after the holidays. They had suggested December 26th, 9 in the morning, New York headquarters. That meeting could determine whether my company gained a multi-million-dollar contract. And now my mother was demanding I abandon it all to serve food at the very party where this same CEO would appear. The irony was suffocating. I remembered the way my mother had introduced us at the country club 2 months earlier. "This is Cassie, our star, working in public relations. And oh, this is Isabella, she helps out in the kitchen sometimes." My father had chuckled as if it were a harmless joke. Cassie had basked in the glow while I had stood frozen holding a tray of hors d'oeuvres I had prepared. None of them realized that morning I had closed a contract worth $500,000. They did not ask. They did not want to know. By 5 o'clock, Cassie had texted again. "Do not mess this up. Michael Grant will be there at 8 tomorrow evening. He is bringing his team. This is crucial for me. No acknowledgement of my life, no question of whether I had plans, only the assumption that I was her staff." I felt the heat rising in my chest. I typed back, but then erased the words. Nothing I could write would make her see me differently. As the clock hit 6, I walked out into the cold evening air of Manhattan. The streets were crowded with holiday shoppers carrying bright bags, their faces flushed with cheer. Mine was not. My mind replayed years of similar conversations. Years of being told that Cassie was the jewel and I was the shadow. At Thanksgiving, it was Bella will handle the turkey. At Easter, Bella can set the table. At birthdays, Bella will clean up. 7 o'clock that night, I sat with my notebook and began sketching a decision tree. If I gave in and cooked, I would reinforce the role they had written for me. If I refused, there would be screaming accusations and threats of being cut off. Yet there was a third path, one that pulsed through my thoughts with growing clarity. What if I showed up not as their maid, but as myself, the CEO of EventLink? At 8 o'clock, I called my operations manager, James. I asked him to confirm the backup catering team was on standby for the Grant meeting. He said yes, they were ready. Then he hesitated and asked, "Bella, are you okay? You sound cornered." I swallowed hard. "I am, but I will not stay cornered. Something has to change tomorrow." 9 o'clock found me reviewing the contract draft once more. The figures gleamed $2 million in projected revenue from the Grant Partnership expansion into Florida, resorts new jobs for my team. This was not a dream. It was work I had built line by line, invoice by invoice, long nights and early mornings. Yet my family believed I was unemployed. By 10:30, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. My phone buzzed again. This time it was an email from my mother with the subject line, "Urgent Christmas Eve Menu." She had attached a file with detailed instructions down to which crystal glasses to use and what garnish should accompany each course. It was absurd. It was insulting. But more than that, it was final proof of how little they valued me. Midnight struck, and I whispered into the darkness. They will see who I am, whether they like it or not. The morning of December 24th arrived cold and sharp. At 9, I boarded the train to Connecticut. As the countryside blurred past the window, I thought back to every time I had been erased. 16th birthday, a cake eaten in the kitchen while Cassie's friends laughed in the dining room. Senior prom, my dress hanging untouched while I ironed Cassie's gown. The previous Christmas when I was ordered to stay in the kitchen while Cassie opened gifts in front of our extended relatives. At 11:30, the train pulled into the station. My father was there in his heavy coat, silent as always. He carried my bag without comment as if I were a guest and not his daughter. The ride to the house was quiet, only the sound of tires on icy roads. At noon sharp, I stepped inside the decorated halls of our family home. Garlands hung from the staircase lights twinkled on the tree, and the air smelled of pine. It was beautiful, but to me it felt cold like a stage set. My mother appeared in the doorway with her clipboard of instructions. "You are late," she said, though I was not. She shoved the papers into my hands. "Get to work. Do not embarrass us." In that moment, standing there at 12:05 on Christmas Eve, I felt the weight of years pressing down. Yet beneath it a spark flared. They did not know it yet, but I was no longer their maid. The next 24 hours would prove it. And when the clock struck 8 in the evening and Michael Grant walked through the door, it would not be Cassie who owned the future. It would be me. December 24th, 9 in the morning, Grand Central Station. The winter air bit at my cheeks as I carried my suitcase onto the train that would take me back to Connecticut. My heart felt heavier than the luggage in my hands. The ride was supposed to last just over an hour, but in that hour, memories came flooding back with the sharpness of broken glass. I slid into a window seat, the landscape rushing past in streaks of gray and white, and I remembered the first time I realized what role my family had cast me in. It was my 16th birthday. The house was full of relatives, and Cassie had insisted the celebration be held in her honor as well, because she had just won a local beauty pageant. While my cousins gathered around her for photos, I was ordered into the kitchen to slice the cake and prepare coffee. I remember holding the knife in my hand, feeling its weight, not because of the cake, but because of the humiliation. When the cake was finally served, my name was not even on the candles. Only Cassie's. They ate, they laughed, and I sat in the background with frosting on my fingers, invisible. The train swayed and I held onto the armrest. I thought about the night of my high school prom. I had worked for months at a part-time job to buy a pale blue dress. I was so proud of it. But the week before prom, Cassie announced she had been invited by a senior boy, and my mother immediately declared all attention must go to her. "Bella, you do not really need to go," she said. "Besides, you are not as social as your sister. It would be a waste." They made me steam Cassie's gown, curl her hair, polish her shoes. On prom night, I sat at home while Cassie twirled across the dance floor in the dress I had ironed. I stayed awake until midnight, staring at my own unused dress hanging on the back of the door. The train conductor called out the next stop, and another shard of memory cut into me. Christmas Eve the year before. Our extended family had gathered uncles and aunts and cousins, filling the house with chatter. My mother had insisted I remain in the kitchen while Cassie opened gifts by the fire. "We need everything to be smooth. Your sister should be the focus. You are good at helping," she said. I spent the night balancing trays of appetizers, listening through the walls as my relatives praised Cassie's charm and ambition. At one point, I caught my reflection in the kitchen window. I looked like the hired help, not a daughter. The train slowed as it passed frozen fields. I pressed my forehead against the glass. Each memory stacked on the next like bricks in a wall, trapping me inside. I realized then that I had been conditioned to accept invisibility, but not today. Today, something inside me rebelled. At 10:30, I opened my laptop. The EventLink dashboard glowed with numbers that told a story my family never cared to hear. Contracts signed, revenue streams growing, employees thriving. 15 people depended on me, from chefs to project managers. My head chef, Maria, had just put down a deposit for her first apartment because of the salary I paid her. James, my operations manager, had enrolled his 2 kids in better schools. Every metric on that screen was proof of my value, yet my mother had told me the night before that I had nothing going on. At 11 o'clock, my phone buzzed again. A text from Cassie. "Do not embarrass me tomorrow. Michael Grant is huge. He needs to see that I can host big events. Just do your job in the kitchen. Smile, serve, and disappear." I stared at the message, bile rising in my throat. She had no idea that the contract she coveted was mine to win or lose. She did not even consider that I could have a role beyond setting out plates. The train finally pulled into the station at 11:30. My father was waiting in his heavy wool coat. He carried my suitcase in silence, his eyes fixed ahead. He had always been the quiet one, never defending me, never challenging my mother. In some ways, his silence cut deeper than her sharpest words. It told me I was not worth the effort of standing up for. As we drove through the streets of our Connecticut town, I recognized the houses decorated with lights, the children building snowmen, the carolers on corners. It was festive alive. Yet, when we turned into our driveway at 11:55, I felt dread settle over me like a shadow. At noon, sharp, I entered the house. It was as beautiful as ever. Garlands draped the banisters, a massive tree glittered with gold ornaments, candles flickered on the mantel. The air smelled of cinnamon and pine, but it felt cold, like a theater stage, hiding a rotten script. My mother Margaret appeared at the top of the stairs with a clipboard in her hand. "You are late," she declared, though the clock had just struck 12. She handed me a thick packet of instructions menus plating diagrams, schedules for each course. "Get started. Do not embarrass us," she snapped. I stood in the hallway, the papers trembling in my hands. Every fiber of my being wanted to scream, to rip the papers apart, to throw them back at her feet. But I said nothing. Not yet. I needed time. At 12:30, Cassie came gliding down the stairs in a silk robe, her hair wrapped in curlers. She smirked at me. "Remember, this dinner is my chance. Michael Grant is here for me. Do not ruin it." She did not even wait for a reply before she vanished into her room to prepare. By 1 o'clock, I had slipped into the small bedroom that used to be mine. It had been converted into a storage space for Cassie's wardrobe. My trophies from school, my books, my old sketches were all crammed into boxes in the basement. Cassie's dresses hung where my life once did. I sat on the edge of the bed, my fists clenched. At 2 o'clock, my laptop pinged with an incoming message. It was from Michael Grant's assistant. Mr. Grant would like to confirm the in-person meeting for December 26th at 9 in the morning, New York headquarters. My heart thudded. This was it. The contract, the future, the recognition. My family had no idea. I closed the laptop and lay back on the bed. Through the wall, I could hear Cassie laughing on the phone, telling her friends how tomorrow would prove her brilliance. I stared at the ceiling, anger burning hotter with each second. They thought they had written my role forever, but they were wrong. By 3 in the afternoon, I rose with a decision. I would not be their maid. Not tomorrow. Not ever again. The memories had haunted me long enough. The humiliation had scarred me deeply, but those scars had also made me strong. They had taught me how to endure, how to build quietly, how to rise unseen until the moment I chose to step into the light. The train ride that morning had been more than a journey home. It had been a journey back through years of being silenced, erased, underestimated. Now it was nearly time to break free. And though my mother and sister could not yet see it, the balance of power in our family was about to change forever. 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Christmas Eve. The house was loud with preparations, Cassie's friends popping in and out to drop off decorations and gossip about the guest list, my mother barking orders at the cleaning staff, and my father retreating into his study as always. I closed my bedroom door, though it was no longer really mine, and pulled my laptop from my bag. The glow of the screen felt like a lifeline. On it was the one truth my family could not erase: EventLink. EventLink had started as an idea during my freshman year at university. I had worked part-time as a hostess at a small banquet hall, watching event planners fumble logistics and make mistakes that cost clients thousands. I saw gaps everywhere: poor coordination, late deliveries, chaotic communication. By my second year, I had recruited 2 classmates, Maria and James, to help me build a platform that streamlined the entire process. We worked from dorm rooms, coffee shops, and borrowed classrooms, piecing together a company 1 gig at a time. Now, 4 years later, EventLink employed 15 people across catering, design, and operations. We had secured 2 boutique hotels as clients, and our reputation was spreading. The grant contract represented more than revenue. It was recognition. It was proof that a 20-year-old woman dismissed as a maid in her own family could build something worth millions. At 2:15, my email pinged. The subject line read, "Confirmation, meeting December 26th. My stomach tightened as I clicked it open. "Mr. Grant is looking forward to meeting you in person at 9 a.m. on the 26th at our New York headquarters." My breath caught. The timing could not have been more perfect or more cruel. While my family demanded I spend the evening cooking for their guests, I had only 48 hours until I would be sitting across from the man they hoped would crown Cassie as a rising star. At 2:30, footsteps thundered down the hall. Cassie burst into the room, not even bothering to knock. She waved a list in my face. Mother says you need to start prepping. These are the dishes. 7 mains, 10 sides. Don't screw it up. Michael Grant will be here at 8 sharp tomorrow night." Her voice was syrupy with superiority. She did not notice the open laptop on my bed, the EventLink dashboard, visible the graphs of revenue growth climbing upward. Or maybe she saw and dismissed it as irrelevant just as she always had. I nodded slowly, biting back the truth that sat on the tip of my tongue. I could have told her in that moment that Michael Grant's team already knew my name, that I had spent the past month negotiating terms she could only dream of, but I stayed silent. Let them underestimate me one last time. By 3 o'clock, my mother stormed in with her clipboard. "You will begin by marinating the lamb. Use the crystal platters for the antipasto. The Waterford glasses must sparkle. Do not make us look cheap." She jabbed her pen at me as if she were a general commanding a soldier. My father hovered behind her silent, his eyes flicking to me, then away. He had perfected the art of non-interference. I wanted to scream. Instead, I closed my laptop and placed it gently back into my bag. My heart pounded with a secret only I carried. Tomorrow at 9 in the morning, I would step into a Manhattan boardroom and sit across from the very man they were desperate to impress. And I would not be their maid. I would be his partner. At 3:30, Cassie's friends began arriving to help decorate. Laughter and chatter filled the halls. They glanced at me with pity or amusement as I carried trays into the kitchen. To them, I was just the invisible sister. I remembered overhearing one of them last year whisper, "Isn't it sad? Cassie's sister never really found her place. If only they knew." At 4 o'clock, I slipped back into the storage room and retrieved a small leather folder from the bottom of my suitcase. Inside were contracts proposals and financial statements for EventLink. I traced my finger over the embossed logo. This was my armor. This was the proof that I was more than what my family saw. By 4:15, I received another text from Michael Grant's assistant. "Mr. Grant will be accompanied by his senior strategist. Please prepare materials for them both." My pulse quickened. I had been preparing for this moment for months, but now the convergence of family and business made the stakes unbearable. If I allowed myself to be trapped in the kitchen tomorrow night, Michael Grant would see only what my family had painted me to be: a servant, not a leader. At 5 o'clock, my mother reappeared. She held out a pen and a sheet of paper. "Sign this," she demanded. "It states you take responsibility for the catering tomorrow. If anything goes wrong, it will be on you." I stared at the page. The words blurred. It was not enough that they dismissed me. They wanted me bound accountable for their expectations. "No," I said quietly. My voice trembled but did not break. My mother's eyes widened, then narrowed. She raised her hand, but I stepped back. "I am not signing." Cassie appeared in the doorway at 5:15, smirking. "What's the problem?" "Afraid of responsibility you always were. Just sign it. Do your job." She leaned against the doorframe, confident that I would fold as always, but I did not. Instead, at 5:30, I walked into the kitchen. I pulled a notepad from my bag and wrote down 3 numbers: emergency catering services that operated 24/7. I added a business card from EventLink, sliding it underneath the list. I placed the note in the center of the counter. If my family wanted a safety net there, it was. If they ignored it, the disaster would be their choice. It was my quiet rebellion, my silent proof of agency. By 6 o'clock, I sat in the corner of the living room, watching the lights twinkle on the Christmas tree. Guests would arrive in just over 24 hours. Michael Grant would walk through that door at 8 in the evening, expecting a flawless dinner. My mother and sister would expect me to deliver it, but I would not. At 6:30, Cassie walked past, humming her phone pressed to her ear. She was bragging to a friend. "By tomorrow night, Michael Grant will see me as the rising star in PR. He will beg to work with me." I clenched my fists. The ignorance, the arrogance, it was unbearable. 7 o'clock came and went, the house humming with last-minute cleaning. At 8, I retreated to my room and opened the leather folder again. I read through the contract proposal one more time, making mental notes for my meeting on the 26th. My mind buzzed with strategy, with confidence. This was real. This was mine. At 9:30, I set my alarm and lay down on the narrow bed. The voices of my family drifted through the walls. Cassie's laughter, my mother's instructions, my father's silence. I closed my eyes and imagined Michael Grant's face when he realized who I was. Not a maid, not a shadow, a CEO. By 10, the house had grown quieter, the halls dark. I whispered into the darkness once again. They will see. And with that, I fell asleep clutching the folder of my future like a shield against the weight of my past. December 24th, 3:30 in the afternoon. The house smelled of cloves and pine, but beneath the fragrance was tension so thick it made the air heavy. I had been summoned into the dining room by my mother. Margaret stood at the head of the long mahogany table, clipboard in hand, glasses glinting under the chandelier. Cassie lounged in one of the velvet chairs, scrolling her phone with the careless ease of someone who believed the world bent for her. My father hovered by the sideboard, pretending to examine the crystal decanters, though everyone knew he was avoiding confrontation. On the table in front of my mother lay a sheet of paper. "Sign this," she said without greeting. Her voice carried the sharp edge of command. "It states you will take full responsibility for tomorrow's catering. If anything goes wrong, it will be on you." She tapped the pen against the paper as if daring me to resist. I stared at the document. The words blurred, but the meaning was clear. They wanted me bound, trapped, and silent. It was not enough that I had been treated like a servant for years. Now they wanted me legally accountable for the success of a dinner I had never agreed to host. "No," I said. My voice was quiet, but the word cracked through the air like ice. Cassie looked up, eyebrows arched. "What do you mean, no? This is not optional." My mother's lips tightened into a line. "Do not test me, Isabella. Family comes first. Your sister's career depends on this dinner. We cannot risk embarrassment." I felt my pulse quicken, but I did not waver. "Family only comes first when you need me as a maid. I am not signing." At 3:35, my mother's hand twitched upward. The gesture was sharp, a familiar signal that usually ended with me flinching. This time, I stepped back. Her hand froze mid-air. Silence fell. My father cleared his throat but said nothing. Cassie smirked. "Afraid of responsibility. Bella, you always were." I clenched my fists at my sides. "I am not afraid. I am refusing." At 3:40, I turned and walked out of the dining room. My legs trembled, but my spine felt straighter than it had in years. For the first time, I had said no. By 4 o'clock, I was in the kitchen. The counters gleamed from my mother's obsessive cleaning, every pot and pan lined up like soldiers. I pulled out a notepad from my bag, the one I used for drafting shopping lists when EventLink handled last-minute orders. With deliberate strokes, I wrote down 3 phone numbers, emergency catering services that operated 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I knew them well because my company often competed with them. If my family swallowed their pride, they could still save their precious dinner. Beside the list, I placed a business card from EventLink. It did not state my title, only the logo and number. I positioned it carefully in the center of the counter where no one could miss it. To them, it might look like a scrap of paper. To me, it was a line in the sand, a chance for them to choose humility. If they ignored it, the disaster would be their own doing. At 4:30, Cassie strutted into the kitchen. She glanced at the note and sneered. "What is this, a backup plan? We do not hire cheap substitutes. That would make us look desperate." She crumpled the paper in her fist and tossed it toward the trash. My stomach twisted, but I said nothing. She did not notice the EventLink card that slid under the edge of the cutting board. I left it there intentionally. By 5 o'clock, Cassie returned with another list of demands. "Mother says you need to polish the silver before you start cooking. Do not forget the truffle oil." Her tone dripped with superiority. I met her gaze calmly. "I will not be cooking tomorrow." She laughed. "Of course you will. You always do." At 5:15, she leaned closer, her eyes narrowing. "Listen carefully, Bella. If you refuse, you are not just ruining Christmas. You are ruining my future. Michael Grant will see me as unreliable. You will cost me an $8 million contract, and if that happens, I swear you will regret it." Her words sliced, but they no longer pierced. I felt strangely calm. If your future depends on me being invisible, maybe it is not your future to begin with. I walked past her, leaving her stunned. By 6 o'clock, the sun had set. The house glowed with lights guests expected in just over 24 hours. I sat on the edge of the narrow bed in the storage room, my heart steady. In my bag lay the leather folder with EventLink's contracts, the confirmation email from Michael Grant's assistant, the proof of my work. I touched the folder like a talisman. At 6:30, my father knocked gently on the door. He stood awkwardly, hands in his pockets. "Bella," he said softly, "maybe just go along. It is easier that way." His eyes darted away. He was not cruel, only weak. "I cannot," I replied. "Not this time." He sighed and walked away without another word. 7 o'clock arrived, and I sat at my laptop reviewing my presentation slides for the 26th. Each graph, each chart, each testimonial from satisfied clients reminded me of what was at stake. This was not about rebellion for its own sake. It was about my future, about proving to myself and to the world that I was more than what my family had declared. At 8, I received a text from James, my operations manager. "Everything ready for the grant meeting. We believe in you." I smiled at the screen, warmth filling me. My team saw me. They valued me. They were my real family. 9 o'clock found me pacing the room, rehearsing what I might say if Michael Grant recognized me tomorrow. The thought both terrified and thrilled me. If he associated me with the chaos of my family, it could hurt EventLink. But if he saw the truth, it could change everything. At 10:30, I wrote in my journal. The words flowed fast, sharp. "Tomorrow they will see. I am not their servant. I am a CEO. I built something from nothing. They will understand, not because I told them, but because the truth will stand in front of them undeniable." By 11, the house was quiet. Cassie slept in her room, dreaming of glory. My mother rested with her clipboard by her side. My father likely drank in silence in his study. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Fear curled in my stomach, but beneath it was resolve. Midnight struck, and I whispered again into the dark. They will see. December 25th had nearly begun. In less than 24 hours, Michael Grant would step into our home. My family thought I would be in the kitchen, apron tied, head bowed, but I had already made my decision. I would not cook. I would not serve. I would stand. And as the clock ticked toward the day of reckoning, I felt something I had not felt in years. Freedom. December 24th, 7 in the evening. The sky outside had already gone black, dotted with the glow of Christmas lights strung across every neighboring house. Inside our home, tension pulsed like a drumbeat. Guests began to arrive, their laughter echoing in the grand entryway. Coats taken by hired attendants, voices rising with cheer. I sat quietly in a corner of the parlor, watching the scene unfold as if it were a stage play. At 7:15, the first wave of guests filled the dining room. Executives from regional banks, partners from law firms, a few acquaintances from Cassie's PR circle. My mother glided among them, her smile stretched tight, boasting about the feast to come. "My eldest daughter is preparing everything herself," she said, gesturing vaguely toward the kitchen. Heads nodded approvingly. They imagined me bustling like a dutiful servant. None of them knew the kitchen was silent, the counters bare, the oven cold. By 7:30, whispers began. A guest asked politely when appetizers would be served. My mother waved her hand with false confidence. "Just a few minutes." Cassie appeared in a sequined dress, radiant, soaking in admiration. She laughed and steered conversations toward her career, hinting that a very important guest was coming. Her friends giggled knowingly. 7:45, still no food. Guests shifted in their chairs. Glasses clinked awkwardly. I watched my mother's jaw tighten as she slipped into the kitchen. Through the open doorway, I saw her eyes scan the empty counters. She froze. On the center island lay the note I had left 3 catering hotlines and the EventLink card half hidden beneath a cutting board. She snatched it up, read it, and for a fleeting second her eyes flickered with panic. Then she crushed the paper in her fist. Pride would not let her call for help. At 8 o'clock sharp, the front door opened again. The air shifted instantly. Michael Grant stepped inside, tall and composed in a tailored suit flanked by two senior executives. Conversation paused a ripple moving through the crowd. This was the man they had all been waiting for. Cassie nearly floated across the floor to greet him. "Mr. Grant, welcome." "We are so honored." Her voice dripped with charm. My mother hurried to his side, showering him with praise. I stayed seated in the corner, half hidden by the Christmas tree. My heart thudded. He was here. The man who could change everything for my company. The man my family believed would hand them validation. He shook hands, exchanged pleasantries, and was led into the dining room. By 8:15, the pressure became unbearable. Guests expected courses to begin. Cassie whispered furiously to my mother. Margaret's face grew pale. They ducked into the kitchen again. I followed silently and stood in the doorway. My mother hissed. "Where is the food?" Cassie snapped. "She is sabotaging us." She pointed at me with accusation. I lifted my chin. "I told you I would not cook." Margaret's voice cracked. "You ungrateful child! You will ruin us!" She gestured toward the crumpled paper on the counter. "You call those numbers. Fix this." "No," I said calmly. "I already did my part. I left you the option. You chose to ignore it." Cassie's face twisted with rage. "Then I will fix it myself." She snatched her phone and began dialing restaurants. Her voice grew shrill as one after another told her the same truth. Christmas Eve, fully booked kitchens closed. By 8:20, sweat shone on her forehead. At 8:25, she shouted, "Fine pizza! Whoever can deliver the fastest!" At 8:30, the doorbell rang. The delivery boy stood awkwardly in the grand foyer, holding stacks of greasy cardboard boxes. Margaret's face turned crimson. She grabbed the boxes, hissing at Cassie to find plates. Within minutes, Papa John's and Domino's pizza was laid out on Waterford crystal platters. The sight was grotesque. Guests whispered, some covering their mouths to hide smirks. Michael Grant's eyes swept the table. He said nothing, but the corner of his mouth twitched as though he had seen everything. He accepted a slice politely, yet his gaze flicked toward me in the corner. I lowered my eyes, but felt the heat of recognition building. By 8:45, the disaster was undeniable. Grease stained the fine linens. The scent of cheap tomato sauce clashed with the polished air of the dining room. Guests excused themselves early. Conversations faltered. Laughter turned brittle. Margaret tried to salvage dignity, insisting there had been a minor kitchen mishap, but no one believed her. Cassie attempted to pitch her PR services between bites of lukewarm pizza desperation dripping from her voice. Heads shook. A few guests left outright. At 9 o'clock, the humiliation was complete. Plates smeared with sauce and crumbs littered the table. Margaret sat stiff, her smile gone. Cassie whispered frantically to Michael Grant, but he only nodded politely, his expression unreadable. My father poured himself another drink in silence. The room reeked of failure. I remained still, heart pounding. This was the moment. They had tried to bury me in the kitchen, but the emptiness of that kitchen had revealed the truth. My rebellion had not been loud or violent. It had been simple, deliberate. And now, before the most important guest of their lives, my family's arrogance had collapsed. By 9:15, guests began slipping away, murmuring excuses. Margaret's eyes darted around, desperate to hold on to scraps of reputation. Cassie's makeup streaked as she whispered, "This is your fault at me again and again." But the truth was plain. They had been offered a way out and refused it. They had chosen pride over pragmatism. The ruin was theirs. At 9:30, the last slice of pizza sat untouched on a silver platter. Michael Grant rose from his chair, buttoned his jacket, and extended a polite thank you. My mother stammered. Cassie clutched his arm, begging for another chance to speak with him privately. He disengaged gently, his gaze sweeping the room one last time before settling on me. Our eyes met, and in that silent glance I felt both dread and possibility. The disaster was complete. The night they had planned to showcase their brilliance had become a legend of humiliation, and I knew in my bones that everything was about to change. December 24th, 8:45 in the evening. The living room was hushed after the chaos of pizza boxes and stained crystal. Some guests had already fled into the night, others lingered out of politeness, murmuring about traffic and long drives home. Cassie clutched her wineglass, her shoulders rigid, her laughter forced. Margaret perched in her chair, her face pale and stiff as porcelain. My father had retreated into silence once again, pouring a drink he did not need. And then it happened. Michael Grant, who had been sitting quietly through the entire ordeal, rose from his chair. He scanned the room, his sharp eyes lingering on details no one else wanted to notice: the grease spots on the linen, the boxes shoved under the buffet, the nervous faces of guests pretending everything was fine. Then, deliberately, his gaze moved to me. I sat half hidden by the Christmas tree, the glow of the lights casting shadows across my face. My heart raced. He studied me for a moment longer than courtesy demanded, his brow furrowing. "Excuse me," he said, finally, his deep voice cutting through the chatter. The room stilled. "You." Isabella Thompson correct. Gasps rippled across the gathering. My mother's head snapped toward me, her eyes wide with horror. Cassie nearly dropped her glass. I stood slowly, every muscle trembling. "Yes," I said, my voice steady despite the thunder in my chest. Michael tilted his head. "We have corresponded, have we not, EventLink, the proposals for integrated hospitality solutions?" The silence deepened. Cassie's lips parted as if she had misheard. My mother's jaw clenched, color flooding her face. I nodded once. "Yes, Mr. Grant, that was me." The room erupted in whispers. Some guests exchanged incredulous looks, others openly gawked. Margaret slammed her hand against the armrest. "She is lying," she hissed. "Do not listen. She has no career, no business. She is only here to cook." Michael ignored her. His attention remained fixed on me. "Interesting," he murmured, "because the data and precision of those proposals impressed me greatly. I had intended to meet the author after the holidays." He allowed the weight of his words to hang in the air. "I did not expect to find her here tonight." Cassie sprang from her seat, her voice high-pitched. "No, she is nothing. She sabotaged this dinner. She wanted to embarrass us. She always does." She gestured wildly at the empty platters and greasy boxes. "Look at this disaster. Do you think she could run a business? She cannot even make Christmas dinner." Michael's expression hardened. "On the contrary, what I see is a young woman who refused to be forced into a role that did not honor her abilities." He glanced at the note still crumpled on the counter, half visible. "I also see evidence she left you options which you chose to ignore." Guests shifted uncomfortably. My mother's face blanched. Cassie shook her head violently, muttering denials. But the tide had turned. At 9 o'clock sharp, Michael stepped forward, addressing the room with a calm authority that silenced every protest. "I spent this evening observing," he said. "I watched a family so consumed with appearances that they ignored competence standing in plain sight. Isabella, or Bella, as I believe you prefer, demonstrated something rare tonight. Leadership is not about pleasing unreasonable demands. Leadership is about setting boundaries and offering solutions even if others reject them. She did both." My chest tightened as his words sank in. He had seen. He had understood. Margaret leapt to her feet. "This is madness. She is 20 years old. She has no experience. She hides in her room playing with spreadsheets. Cassie is the one with talent. Cassie has connections. Cassie is our future." Michael's gaze swept over her, cool and unwavering. "Respectfully, Mrs. Thompson, your future tonight was pizza on Crystal. Isabella's future is something else entirely." Cassie's face twisted. "You cannot be serious. You would throw away an $8 million PR contract because of her lies." Michael folded his hands behind his back. "What I saw tonight convinces me of two things. One, I will not do business with people who belittle their own family for vanity. Two, I would very much like to see what Isabella and EventLink can achieve." The room went utterly silent. My mother sank back into her chair, trembling. My father finally looked at me, really looked for the first time in years. Cassie's eyes filled with tears, her perfect image collapsing. At 9:15, Michael turned directly to me. "We will meet in New York, December 26th, 9 in the morning. Confirmed." His words rang with finality. "Until then, enjoy your holiday." He extended his hand. My breath caught as I stepped forward and shook it. His grip was firm, steady, filled with the weight of recognition. At 9:20, he excused himself and his team. As he walked toward the door, he paused, briefly glancing back at the ruined table. Sometimes he said softly, "The measure of a family is how they treat their strongest member. Tonight I saw how you were treated. I will remember it." With that, he was gone. The door closed behind him, leaving stunned silence in his wake. Cassie crumpled into her chair, sobbing. My mother pressed her hands to her temples, muttering denials. My father poured yet another drink. And me. I stood tall, my heart pounding with a mix of vindication and relief. For the first time, the truth had broken through the walls of lies. The mask had slipped. The world had seen what my family tried so hard to bury. At 9:30, the last of the guests made polite excuses and left. Margaret snapped at me, her voice cracking. "You will pay for this humiliation." Cassie wailed, "You destroyed everything." But their fury no longer mattered. The balance of power had shifted. By 9:45, I returned to the storage room that had once been mine. I sat on the bed leather folder in my lap and let the silence settle. My heart still raced, but for the first time it was not from fear. It was from freedom. Christmas Eve was supposed to crown Cassie the star. Instead, it had revealed the truth. And as I closed my eyes that night, I whispered the words that had carried me this far. They will see. December 24th, 9 o'clock in the evening. The room had just fallen into stunned silence after Michael Grant's unexpected recognition of me. The echo of his words still lingered in the air. Leadership is not about pleasing unreasonable demands. It is about setting boundaries and offering solutions. My family sat frozen, their carefully polished masks cracking in front of the most important guest of their lives. And yet, the night was not over. Michael did not simply leave his observation hanging. He remained standing in the middle of the room, tall and commanding his presence, drawing every eye. He took a step closer to me. "Isabella," he said, his voice measured, "I would like you to share something with everyone here. Tell them what EventLink is." My throat tightened. For years, I had hidden my work from this family, knowing they would dismiss it, belittle it, or worse, claim it as their own. But this was my moment. I drew a steady breath. EventLink is an event management company I founded 2 years ago. I began my voice firm, though my hands trembled at my sides. We integrate catering logistics and design into one streamlined system. We employ 15 people across 3 departments. We already service 2 hotels and several private clients, and we are negotiating a contract with Grant Hospitality. Gasps rippled through the remaining guests. Cassie's face went white, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. My mother shook her head violently. "Lies," she spat. "She is fabricating this. She has always been jealous of her sister. She has nothing." Michael raised his hand, silencing her. "I have seen her proposals. I have reviewed her systems. EventLink is real, and it is impressive." His voice carried the weight of authority undeniable. If anything tonight only proves the depth of her professionalism. She could have chosen to expose your lack of preparation before the guests arrived. Instead, she offered solutions you refused. That is not sabotage. That is foresight. At 9:15, Margaret's fury boiled over. She stood abruptly, her chair screeching across the floor. "You do not understand, Mr. Grant. She has no place here. She was supposed to help, not embarrass us. Cassie is the daughter who matters. Cassie is the one building a reputation." Michael's gaze was cold, unwavering. "Mrs. Thompson, I understand more than you realize. What I saw tonight was not embarrassment caused by Isabella. It was a failure born of arrogance. You dismissed her capabilities because they did not fit your narrative. And in doing so, you revealed to everyone here how blind pride destroys opportunity." The words cut sharper than any knife. Some guests nodded quietly, others looked down, unwilling to meet Margaret's eyes. Cassie clutched at her glass, trembling. "But But she is only 20, she stammered. How could she possibly run a business? Michael smiled faintly. Age is not the measure of leadership. Choices are. And tonight, Isabella made choices that demonstrated more maturity than I have seen from many twice her age. At 9:20, he turned directly to me. Tell me, Bella, why did you leave that note in the kitchen with catering hotlines? Why not simply walk away and let them face the disaster? The room-weighted breath held. I straightened my shoulders. Because I am not cruel. I wanted to give them a chance. I knew I would not cook, but I did not want their guests to suffer. I offered alternatives. If they had accepted humility and made the call, the evening could have been saved. But they chose pride. Michael nodded slowly. Exactly. That is what I meant when I said leadership is about boundaries and solutions. You did not simply refuse. You presented a path forward, even knowing they might reject it. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the mark of a true professional. A murmur of agreement spread among the guests, still lingering. My father shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting between me and the floor. For once, he had no drink to hide behind. At 9:30, Michael delivered the coup de grace. I will be frank. I had intended to discuss a potential contract with Cassie's firm, but after witnessing this evening, I cannot in good conscience entrust $8 million to someone who cannot manage a dinner without disparaging her own sister. Reputation is not built on image. It is built on integrity. And tonight, only one person in this family demonstrated it. Cassie's face crumpled. Tears streaked down her cheeks, her voice breaking. This is not fair. You cannot just ignore me. I worked so hard. I deserve this. Michael regarded her coolly. What you deserve is earned through respect, not entitlement. And respect is something you have not shown. Not to me, not to your guests, and certainly not to your sister. At 9:40, Margaret tried one final gambit. She stepped closer to Michael, lowering her voice as if to confide. Mr. Grant, surely you see she is manipulating you. She has always been dramatic, always seeking sympathy. Do not let her ruin Cassie's chance. Michael's eyes hardened. Mrs. Thompson, you speak of sympathy as if it were a weakness. But what I see is strength. Isabella stood against coercion, against dismissal, and still offered you a lifeline. That is not manipulation. That is leadership under pressure. He glanced at me again, his expression softening slightly. And let me tell you something else, Bella. In my line of work, I have seen many ambitious people. What I rarely see is someone willing to risk personal pain to uphold professional boundaries. Tonight, you showed me that quality. That is why I value you, not just your company, you. The words struck like a bell inside me, resonant and undeniable. For the first time, someone of power had looked past my family's narrative and recognized me for who I was. At 9:45, the atmosphere shifted permanently. Guests who had been skeptical began murmuring words of praise. Remarkable, one banker whispered. To build something at 20, another nodded. She has grit. My father cleared his throat. For once, he spoke. Is this true, Bella? You built all this. His voice cracked a mixture of shame and awe. I met his gaze. Yes. And you never asked. He looked away, shoulders slumping. Margaret sat heavily in her chair, silent for the first time that night. Cassie sobbed quietly, mascara streaking down her cheeks. At 10 o'clock, Michael made his final announcement. I will meet Isabella in New York on December 26th at 9 in the morning to finalize discussions. That is the path forward. As for tonight, consider this a lesson in what happens when arrogance blinds judgment. With that, he and his team gathered their coats. As he moved toward the door, he paused, turning back once more. Success is not built on image. It is built on choices made when no one is watching. Isabella has been making those choices for years unseen. Tonight, she is seen. And I, for one, am glad to witness it. The door closed behind him, leaving a hollow silence. The grand house, so full of pretense hours earlier, now felt like a collapsed stage set after the play had ended. Guests trickled out in awkward silence, offering me quiet nods of respect, avoiding Cassie's red eyes and Margaret's stony glare. At 10:15, only family remained. My mother sat rigid, muttering under her breath. Ungrateful. Liar. Thief. My father said nothing. Cassie curled into herself, rocking slightly, whispering that her future was gone. I stood in the doorway, the event link folder clutched in my hands. My voice was calm. I gave you a chance. I gave you options. You refused. This is not on me. This is on you. I walked up the stairs at 10:30, leaving them behind in their ruin. In the privacy of the small storage room, I exhaled for the first time that night. Relief washed over me, mingled with adrenaline. Michael Grant had not only seen me, he had explained to everyone why he valued me. It was not luck. It was logic. Social logic. He had given words to what I had felt for years, but never could prove that leadership is not servitude, that professionalism is not submission, that value is not age, but choices. At 11, I sat at the desk by the window writing in my journal. Tonight, I became visible. Tonight, truth cut through years of lies. They wanted me silent, but Michael made sure my voice was heard. I closed the book, hands steady for the first time in years. Midnight came Christmas Day dawning. While my family drowned in humiliation, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, imagining the boardroom of December 26th. It was no longer a dream. It was a certainty. By 12:30, the house had gone quiet. Downstairs, I could still hear muffled sobs from Cassie and the scrape of a glass from my father. My mother's footsteps paced relentlessly, her anger unspent. But their noise no longer held me captive. At 1 a.m, I finally drifted to sleep. And for the first time in a long time, I dreamed not of being erased, but of being recognized. Christmas Eve had ended not with a feast, but with greasy boxes and shattered pride. Yet for me, it had ended with something priceless validation. Not just from a CEO, but from a man who had explained in front of everyone why I deserved to stand tall. And in the quiet of the night, I whispered once more, "They will see." December 25th, 10 o'clock in the morning. Snow fell lightly over Connecticut, blanketing the streets in quiet white. Inside our house, silence reigned, but it was not the peace of Christmas morning. It was the heavy silence of humiliation. I sipped my coffee at the small desk in the upstairs storage room, scrolling through my phone. My notifications were buzzing with messages not from friends or co-workers, but from acquaintances across town. Word of the disaster had already spread. By 10:15, the first headline appeared on a local blog, Sullivan's famous Christmas feast reduced to pizza boxes. Photos circulated someone had snapped shots of greasy slices served on Waterford crystal. The image was absurd surreal, and beneath the photo comments piled up. Unbelievable. Thought they were the picture of elegance. Guess money can't buy class. At 10:30, I overheard my mother in the hallway voice shrill as she spoke on the phone. It was all Isabella's fault. She abandoned us. But her protests sounded hollow. The evidence was too strong. People had seen her guests leave early, seen Michael Grant depart with a cool expression, seen the chaos she had tried to mask. By 11, Cassie stormed into my room, eyes red, cheeks streaked with tears. "Do you realize what you've done?" she hissed. "Michael Grant was supposed to give me that contract. He won't return my calls. My reputation is ruined." She clenched her fists, trembling. "This was my chance, Bella, my future. You destroyed it." I looked at her calmly. "I didn't destroy anything. You had options. You threw them away." I gestured toward the crumpled note still half stuffed in her purse. "You could have called. You didn't." Her face twisted with rage. "You think you're better than me. You're nothing without us. You'll see." But her words lacked conviction. She spun on her heel and slammed the door, leaving me in the quiet once again. At noon, my phone buzzed with an email notification. Subject line meeting confirmation, December 26th. It was from Michael Grant's office reaffirming our 9 a.m. appointment in New York. I felt my chest tighten with relief and excitement. While my family scrambled to contain their shame, my path forward was clearer than ever. By 1 in the afternoon, news had spread beyond local gossip. The charity board where my mother held a prominent position released a quiet statement. "Effective immediately, Margaret Thompson will no longer serve as chair." The official explanation cited scheduling conflicts, but everyone knew the truth. No board wanted to be associated with the spectacle of pizza served to executives on Christmas Eve. At 1:30, I overheard my father on the phone with his golf buddies. His voice was low, almost pleading. "No, you don't understand, it wasn't like that." But laughter on the other end told me they were not convinced. The men who once toasted him for his family's sophistication now mocked him for being blind to his own daughter's success. At 2 o'clock, Cassie received the blow she had dreaded. An email from one of her PR clients leaked through town gossip. "In light of recent events, we are suspending our partnership. The contract was worth $500,000 annually. Her firm, built on appearances and charm, could not withstand the hit." She collapsed on the living room sofa, sobbing as my mother tried to console her. But even Margaret's words rang hollow. At 2:30, another article appeared online, "From Christmas Feast to Pizza Debacle, What Went Wrong at the Sullivan Home." The piece quoted unnamed guests describing my mother's frantic behavior, Cassie's desperate pitches, and Michael Grant's cool departure. But the most cutting detail was a line buried near the end. One guest claimed the eldest daughter, long dismissed by the family, was the true professional in the room. I closed my eyes, the truth sinking deeper. For years, they had called me invisible. Now their invisibility was the story. By 3 o'clock, my father finally approached me in the storage room. He carried no clipboard, no drink, only a weary expression. "Bella," he said softly, "I need to ask. Is it true? EventLink, the contracts, the staff, all of it?" "Yes," I replied, meeting his gaze without flinching. "It's all true." "You never asked." He sighed heavily, rubbing his face. "I saw the business registration once years ago. Mail came by mistake." "But your mother, she said it was nothing." "I should have spoken up." His voice cracked. "I'm ashamed." For a moment, I almost felt pity. Almost. But pity was not forgiveness. "You had years to see me," I said. "You chose silence." At 4 in the afternoon, the doorbell rang. Margaret rushed to answer, her heels clacking. A neighbor stood with a casserole, offering sympathy thinly veiled as curiosity. "Heard things were difficult last night," she said. Margaret forced a smile, but her eyes betrayed panic. The casserole was accepted, but the gossip had already traveled faster than food. By 5, social media was aflame. Hashtags trended locally, #pizza, on, Crystal, #Sullivan Feast, fail. People mocked, laughed, speculated. For a family that had prided itself on spotless appearances, this was death by ridicule. At 6 o'clock, I received another email, this one from my PR manager, a professional I had quietly hired months ago. "Forbes would like to finalize your feature for their 40 under 40 list. It will publish on December 27th. My heart soared. The timing was poetic. While my family scrambled to salvage their image, mine was about to be broadcast nationwide. At 7, I joined my team on a video call. Faces lit up my laptop screen, Maria, James, the junior planners, all smiling. "We heard what happened," James said carefully. "Word is all over. But Bella, they're talking about you. Michael Grant defended you. Clients will notice," Maria added. "We've got your back. Whatever happens on the 26th, you won't be walking in alone." Their loyalty steadied me. These were my people, my real family. By 8, the house below had descended into chaos. Margaret shouted at Cassie. Cassie screamed back. My father tried to quiet them both. I shut the door, shutting out their noise. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael Grant's assistant. Looking forward to the 26th, Mr. Grant was impressed. I smiled to myself, the weight of years lifting from my shoulders. At 9, I sat by the window, the snow falling softly outside, lights twinkling in the distance. Christmas should have been about peace, warmth, and family. For me, it was about survival, revelation, and consequence. My family had chosen pride over humility, and the world had seen the result. By 10 o'clock, Cassie barged into my room again, face streaked with mascara. "You think this makes you the hero? You think Michael Grant really cares about you? You're nothing. Nothing." She screamed until her voice broke, then collapsed against the doorframe. I stared at her quietly. "If I'm nothing, then why did he call me the one with leadership?" She glared, speechless. Finally, she staggered away, leaving me in the dark. At 11, I wrote again in my journal. Christmas Day brought consequences, not gifts. But maybe consequences are the greatest gift of all. They strip away illusions. They force truth into the open. Tonight, my family pays the price of arrogance. And tomorrow, I step into my future. Midnight struck. December 26th had arrived. My meeting with Michael Grant was hours away. While my family drowned in disgrace, I would walk into a boardroom and sign my future into existence. And as the clock turned, I whispered to the night once more, "They will see." December 26th, 9 in the morning. The lobby of Grant Hospitality's New York headquarters gleamed with marble floors and towering glass walls. My heart pounded as I crossed the space leather folder tucked under my arm, EventLink's future inside it. The receptionist greeted me with a smile and led me to the elevators. As I rode up, I thought of the previous 2 days, the humiliation my family endured the moment Michael Grant had looked me in the eye and called me a leader, the endless texts and calls from my mother and sister that I ignored. All of it had led here. At 9 o'clock sharp, I entered the boardroom. Michael Grant stood at the head of a long table, his senior strategist beside him. He extended his hand with the same calm authority he had shown 2 nights earlier. "Bella," he said warmly, "thank you for coming. Let's make history." We began the meeting, my slides projected onto the wall. I spoke clearly, confidently, outlining EventLink's systems, our proven results, our scalability. Michael listened intently occasionally, asking questions, nodding as I answered. At 9:30, the discussion shifted to numbers. The strategist examined our financial projections, challenging some assumptions. I countered with evidence data case studies. My voice did not waver. For the first time in my life, I felt fully seen. At 10 o'clock, Michael leaned back in his chair. "That's enough. I've heard what I needed to hear. Isabella Thompson. I believe in you. I believe in EventLink. Let's finalize this contract." He signed with a flourish, sliding the papers across the table. My hand shook slightly as I wrote my name. Just like that, the deal was done. $2 million in projected revenue, national recognition, a seat at the table I had been denied for years. After the signing, Michael clasped my hand once more. "You need to understand something," he said. "I didn't choose you only because your proposal was strong. I chose you because of how you handled yourself on Christmas Eve. You didn't just refuse to be used. You offered solutions, stood firm, and let others bear responsibility for their choices. That's what a true leader does. That's why I'm investing in you." His words sank deep. They weren't about contracts or money. They were about dignity, boundaries, and the strength I had been forced to forge in silence. By 11, I stepped out of the building into the crisp winter air. Snowflakes drifted gently down, catching in my hair. My phone buzzed with messages, congratulations from my team, inquiries from new clients, even a request from a journalist who had heard whispers of the deal. I smiled for the first time in days. Not a small smile of survival, but a wide, unrestrained smile of triumph. At 6 in the evening, I gathered my team at a restaurant in Manhattan. Maria raised a glass, her eyes shining. To Bella, who saw us when no one else did. And to EventLink, which is just getting started. Cheers erupted around the table. For once, the toast was not for Cassie, not for appearances, not for anyone else's ego. It was for me. Back in Connecticut, the fallout deepened. My mother's reputation at the country club collapsed. She was quietly removed from 2 more charity boards. My father faced snickers on the golf course. Cassie's firm hemorrhaged clients until she was forced to lay off staff. On December 27th, the Forbes article went live. My face graced the cover, the headline, "Bold from Invisible to Indispensable. How Isabella Thompson Built an Event Empire Without Family Support." The story detailed my journey, my struggles, and my triumphs. It quoted Michael Grant, praising my resilience. The article went viral, shared across social media, dissected by commentators, admired by entrepreneurs. On the evening of December 27th, my phone lit up with a call from my mother. Against my better judgment, I answered. Her voice was shaky. "Bella, please. We need to talk. People are asking questions. They're saying we didn't even know what you were doing. They're calling us blind." I paused, letting the silence stretch. Then I said quietly, "That's because you were blind. I tried to tell you. You never listened." Her voice broke. We're sorry. We lost everything. Cassie's contracts my positions. People are mocking us. Can't you help us fix this? I drew a steady breath. I will not be your maid anymore, Mother. Not in the kitchen, not in your reputation. If you want to repair what you lost, that's your work to do. She cried softly on the other end. Please, Bella. But I ended the call. For the first time, I felt no guilt. On December 30th, I hosted a small party for my employees at our new Manhattan office. We drank champagne, laughed, and celebrated not just the contract, but the community we had built. Maria hugged me tightly. You gave us all a chance when no one else would. That's what makes you different. Her words echoed Michael's, and I realized she was right. My leadership wasn't about money or power. It was about seeing people, respecting them, valuing their contributions. The opposite of what my family had done to me. That night, after the celebration ended, I sat by my window overlooking Central Park. The city sparkled below, alive with possibility. My phone buzzed again this time, an email from my father. His words were brief. Bella, I failed you. I stayed silent when I should have spoken. I let pride blind me. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know I am proud of you. Tears filled my eyes, but they were not bitter. They were cleansing. On New Year's Eve, I received a final message from Cassie. It was a text, just 4 words, I can't believe you. I stared at it for a long moment, then typed my reply. Believe it. I am CEO. I hit send and felt the weight of years lift from my shoulders. As the clock struck midnight, fireworks burst over the city. I raised my glass to the window and whispered, They see now. The world sees. The story of that Christmas Eve lived on in whispers and articles in the memory of everyone who had been there. But for me, it was not about humiliation or revenge. It was about revelation. The moment I stopped being invisible. The moment I chose myself. And if there is one lesson I carry from it, one message I would leave with anyone who has ever been dismissed or diminished, it is this. Boundaries are not cruelty. Boundaries are self-respect. Refusing to play the role others force on you does not make you selfish. It makes you free. So I end my story with this truth. Never let anyone convince you that your worth is measured by how much you serve them. Success does not require their permission. Respect is not negotiable. And sometimes the greatest revenge is not revenge at all. It is becoming everything they said you could never be. If you've ever had to stand up to family to walk away from being underestimated, share your story in the comments. Your words might be the encouragement someone else needs today. And remember, you are not obligated to stay small so others can feel big.